Hey y'all, it's me, Dr. Lynn Daniel, PhD, EDS. I am the self-care evangelist here on social media. You all, we will be entering the 90 days season of self-care, season of care. This is a 90-day self-care challenge that I'm inviting women, particularly women my age, baby boomers, but women of all ages are invited to join us on this transformative journey. And so I'm coming today because I want to give you all some insight into this. If you're being targeted, harassed, mistreated, you better believe it's an inside job. It's an inside job. All right, so let's get into it. Let me share my screen. Okay, you all, we're going to take a look at identifying and handling predatory behaviors. I want you to know from a spiritual standpoint, those of you who are targeted, your family dynamics is one of abuse, scapegoating, ostracizing. There is a dynamic that correlates this behavior to sacrificing. It's a type of sacrificing. And depending on the family dynamics or the dynamics of the institution, organization, but particularly the family, because that's your first institution that you've engaged with. Depending on the dynamics will depend on the severity of the sacrifice and what type of sacrifice will happen. This is a bold declaration that I'm making, but we're going to talk about it because there are people wondering why they are targeted. You're targeted because someone in your family has given you permission to be targeted, whether that is in the physical realm or in the spiritual realm. You've been given permission, you have been given up as the sacrifice, okay? If you're targeted. Now, there is, of course, in the Bible teaches us about how the children of Israel abandoned their belief system in the one true living God and began to sacrifice their children to Molech. This is in Leviticus, in 2 Kings. In Leviticus 18, God warned them that they should not let any of your descendants pass through the fire to Molech, nor shall you profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. And this forbade the Israelites from sacrificing their children to the pagan god. But they went ahead and did what they saw the Canaanites doing, trying to fit in, to be accepted, or for whatever reason. So in the Bible, there are many examples of families sacrificing children. What, for political gain, for gain or favor with idols, or some sort of selfish personal gain. So what I am speaking about is not far-fetched. In today's times, we just really need to observe the patterns and look at the family structure and the structure of these organizations to note our place in the organization. Okay, so let's move on the slide. Let's talk about what we're going to address. So this is a critical but often overlooked issue. And we're looking at predatory behaviors where specific type of people are targeted. Neurodivergent people, people who are introverted, quiet, or who are just different. Their difference, and It's an observable difference that makes them an easy target. So they're vulnerable, and they lack the skills to identify, um, to read the room. They lack the skills to identify when boundaries are being crossed. They lack social skills, or certain skills that, people attain by various benchmarks and age marks as they mature. Okay, so we are going to take a look at this. So let's understand predatory behaviors. They're calculated attempts to manipulate people, dominate, and exploit, because the individual who is targeted is vulnerable. And so if a family member has offered up a, maybe the quiet child, or the sick child, or the child who is different from the family's values, that individual is targeted because they're different, they stand out, and they should have been protected, but they weren't. Okay, so here are some of the behaviors that are used to control and exploit: gaslighting, love bombing, boundary violations, and then that sudden devaluation. And before you know it, the individual is gone. Vulnerabilities of neurodivergent and introverted individuals. So they may, as I pointed out, struggle with social cues, reading the room. They rely on structure because they lack discernment skills, or the skills that are necessary to identify what is going on around them. And they avoid confrontation because they haven't developed the skill sets to appropriately and to victoriously manage confrontation and conflict. So that's the neurodivergent individual. The introverted individual seeks harmony, avoids, this is their preference, their preferred way of maneuvering life. They seek harmony, avoid conflict, and they may internalize stress by going inward and doing things inwardly, like worrying, obsessing, crying, or indulging in things to calm them down. Predators, these predatory people, they have the traits. For whatever reason, I'm not going to go into trying to understand them, but they exploit the traits of the neurodivergent individuals and the introverted individuals. They cause emotional and psychological harm. How do you recognize predatory behaviors? You watch for gaslighting, because gaslighting is used to make you doubt your reality. So if someone is saying something to you that doesn't line up to what you know to be true, check, put a check mark by that and identify it as gaslighting. Don't internalize it and start questioning yourself automatically. And if you do, back off of it and go into looking at gaslighting. Triangulation is when you have family members or people in institutional organizations who talk about an individual amongst themselves, and they're pitting people against the targeted individual, or maybe even against each other. So it's like a triangle. They say certain words, they share certain details, they plant seeds of negativity, and they pit others against the targeted individual. These individuals, these predators, they violate your boundaries by ignoring established norms or crossing boundaries. And they do it repeatedly, and they do it to ruffle your feathers, to cause strife, to cause contention, and to cause confrontation. They are really trying to see if what they heard about you is true. So they're testing you. And so it's important to develop the skill sets to manage ourselves in these situations, right? Emotional manipulation is when you're known as a kind person, which can be a vulnerability if you don't know how to protect it. Um, and you don't like the discomfort that comes from the emotional manipulation. So you give in. Okay. But you have to note that some people will emotionally manipulate. Like they'll say that they will use things like, oh, death, or you being away, you should always see so and so before they die. And they will use the inevitables to manipulate you when it's not necessary to manipulate individuals who are in a relationship that is established on respect. Like, they're going to be engaged. So watch out for that emotional manipulation, exploitation. How do you handle predatory behaviors? You start by identifying what are the boundaries that are necessary for you to manage your life, your working environment, your family relationships, your friendships. What boundaries do you have? I remember many, many, many years ago when I was going through a time in my life where um, I was single, and I made a boundary for myself that I would not accept phone calls after 9 p.m. Now, that made sense to me because it fit my lifestyle. It made no sense for me to be on the phone, especially with a gentleman or a man, because he may not have been a gentleman if he's calling that late. It made no sense for me to be on the phone that late. Why are you calling that late? Back in the day, that would be called a booty call. Well, you ain't doing a booty call over here, right? So set clear boundaries with yourself first, because you are protecting yourself. You don't have to go around announcing, don't call me after 9. I mean, you will say it to the individual if they do it, or just don't answer the phone and they'll get the hint, right? So know your boundaries and then stick to them. Self advocacy, you use assertive communication with the individuals who matter, right? And you build support networks to help you manage your self advocacy, because oftentimes people who are neurodivergent or introverted, they will question their need for protection. They have been taught, their brain has been wired now because of either they're neurodivergent, their brain is already wired in a certain way, or their personality trait is a certain way if they're introverted. So those individuals have to learn the importance of self advocacy for almost everything, not almost, for everything, and to be able to identify when it is appropriate to speak up. If you feel that something isn't right, don't automatically go to, oh, they didn't mean that. No, don't go to that default of explaining away people's behavior or making excuses for people. Just stand in your space for your needs. Document if this is going on. Begin keeping a record of interactions and patterns of manipulation with individuals. Just keep a notebook, or, you know, an email trail, or whatever, a calendar trail, or however you are documenting. And then, if necessary, depending on where this is happening, so if it's happening in a working environment or a school environment, you need to get an advocate. So you report these behaviors to your advocate. Who is your advocate? Your advocate could be, if you're working with a counselor, your advocate could be someone related to job security, or a job advocate, a job related, employment related advocate, like an association or a consortium or a union, or even HR if you can't uh, settle it before then. Okay. But remember, HR is to protect the company. So when you go to HR, just make sure you really have a solid case. Okay. And then you're just going there out of courtesy. For employers, it's important to prioritize fostering a safe environment. You implement regular trainings on recognizing these types of behaviors, on um, building and establishing the culture that is important to your institution, and train your employees on how that culture looks and how they should behave to support that culture. Okay. So you provide clear policies for safe reporting for vulnerable employees, and you promote a supportive culture. You promote transparency, empathy, and inclusivity. And in conclusion, predatory behaviors are real, they are dangerous, and they can be stopped. So if you are a targeted individual, I encourage you to do a family of origin assessment. And I made a video yesterday on it, is on my YouTube channel, that talks about, it gives you just an introduction on how you can begin a family of origin self-assessment. That way you can begin identifying these patterns, to identify the family dynamics and scapegoating. You can also find some key literature. um, I will put this key literature in the description bar of this video because I have quite a few. You also, when you're doing your family of origin um, assessment, please look at abuse, patterns of abuse and scapegoating in your family. Look at psychological or emotional harm that is happening in your family, or patterns of harm that are happening in your family. And then look at gang stalking, harassment, and employment abuse, because these are levels of sacrifice, you all. I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm laughing because I've experienced these things, right? And I'm like, I survived them. God has been good to me, right? So these things are survivable. You can come out victorious. You can come out victorious. And even if you still have levels of these things going on in your life, which I still do, you can still walk victoriously in this. You will see, you should be able to identify if your family members are participating in coordinated efforts to isolate you, to harass you, to undermine you as an individual, right? These are all actions of sacrifice. And so your family is getting something, they're gaining something from this. You may never be able to pinpoint exactly what it is, but you better know they are getting something: money, monetary gain, some sort of privilege, social privilege, some kind of hierarchical privilege, some kind of insight into information, status, social cohesion. Okay. So check the description bar for the key literature on these in the Bible scriptures, and also check for the link to the Season of Grace 90 Days of Self-Care Challenge that starts November 1st. You'll see what this challenge offers you, and you'll see the scholarship information there as well. Be blessed.